This morning, the Princess of Wales back on the global stage. Kate's first international trip since her cancer recovery, stepping out on her own, a research trip of sorts, learning about a cause she cares deeply about.
Thousands of people have packed the square. People are hanging out the windows, and you can see her right here, meeting some of her littlest fans.
For years, royal insiders believed certain traditions could never be broken. Certain duties belonged to certain people, and no one imagined the future king would challenge that arrangement so publicly. But behind palace walls, a decision was quietly taking shape, one that would leave courtiers stunned, allies scrambling, and one senior royal facing the most humiliating setback of her public life. When Prince William reportedly cancelled Camilla's state visit plans and handed every responsibility to Catherine, it triggered questions nobody inside the monarchy was prepared to answer. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, it was only a whisper moving through the palace offices. A time had changed. A briefing had been delayed. A room once prepared for Camilla's team was suddenly reassigned. Nothing was announced, nothing was explained, but the people closest to the schedule understood one thing immediately. This was not normal. State visits are not casual events. They are planned with precision, guarded with protocol, and treated like living symbols of royal power. So when Camilla's long-prepared role was quietly stopped, the silence around it became louder than any official statement could have been. Then came the second shock. Confidential instructions were said to arrive from William's office, sharp, direct, and impossible to ignore. The message was clear without being dramatic. Catherine would now be briefed, Catherine would now prepare, and Catherine would now carry the duties that had once been expected to sit firmly in Camilla's hands. For some aides, it felt like a practical change. For others, it felt like a line had been crossed, because this was not only about one visit. It was about who the palace trusted to represent the monarchy at its most delicate moments. Catherine's sudden presence in key briefings changed the temperature instantly. She did not step in loudly. She did not need to. Her involvement alone said enough. Every folder placed before her, every advisor pulled into her circle, every quiet adjustment to the schedule seemed to point toward a larger truth. William was no longer waiting for the old order to shift on its own. He was moving it himself. And inside the royal household, that realization landed like thunder. Camilla's supporters began asking questions, but answers were hard to find. Why had the plans been halted so suddenly? Why had William acted with such confidence? Why was Catherine being positioned so strongly, so quickly, and so completely? The more William stayed silent, the more the mystery deepened. Silence became strategy. Strategy became suspicion. And suspicion became the first spark of a palace firestorm. By the time rumors reached the wider royal circle, one belief had already taken hold. This was not a simple schedule correction. It was a signal, a warning, maybe even the opening move in a much bigger plan to reshape royal power around the next generation. And for Camilla, the most painful part was not just losing the duties, it was realizing the decision had been made without giving her the final word. What looked like a simple scheduling change soon revealed a much deeper conflict, one that had been quietly building behind palace doors for months. Long before the announcement shocked royal watchers, subtle signs suggested something wasn't right. Meetings became more secretive. Conversations grew shorter. Certain names reportedly stopped appearing on important planning documents. While the public saw unity, insiders claim a silent struggle for influence was already unfolding, and the cancelled state visit may have been the first visible crack in a much larger battle. The truth, according to those watching the palace machinery closely, did not begin with one cancelled plan. It began with a change in mood, a quiet tightening, a feeling that the monarchy was no longer moving by old habit, but by a new force gathering behind the scenes. For years, Camilla's position carried weight because it was tied to tradition, loyalty, and survival. She had endured storms before. She had watched public judgment turn slowly into public acceptance. But this was different. This was not about winning over the crowd. This was about whether the future of the crown was being planned without her at the center of it. William's influence had been growing in ways that were difficult to ignore. Decisions that once traveled through older royal channels were now being reviewed with sharper eyes, cleaner priorities, and a stronger focus on the next reign. Those close to the household reportedly noticed how often his office became involved in matters once considered routine. Small choices began carrying bigger meaning. Who attended which briefing? Who approved which public message? Who was trusted to represent the family when the stakes were too high for mistakes? And slowly, almost silently, Catherine's name began appearing where Camilla's had once been expected. That shift created unease. Catherine was no longer being treated only as a supportive figure beside William. She was being prepared as a central force. Her role in high-level engagements began to expand, not with noise, but with unmistakable purpose. Every new responsibility placed before her seemed to send the same message. The monarchy was looking forward, and Catherine was becoming one of its strongest answers. To younger advisors, this felt like progress. To traditionalists, it felt like a warning. To Camilla's circle, it felt like the ground moving beneath their feet. Behind closed doors, disagreements reportedly sharpened around the direction of the royal family. Should the crown hold tightly to old arrangements, even if they felt heavy and distant? Or should it move toward a fresher image built around William and Catherine's calm authority? The question was never asked publicly, but it lived inside every private conversation. Soon, palace factions began forming without anyone admitting it. Some believed Camilla deserved protection from embarrassment. Others believed William had every right to shape the future before the future arrived. And as strategic decisions began tilting toward William's team, the cancelled state visit no longer looked sudden. It looked prepared. It looked like the first door closing before another opened. Camilla's allies sensed it, Catherine's supporters understood it, and William's silence only made the message stronger. Something larger was coming. The palace was not simply rearranging duties, it was preparing for a transition that could change the balance of royal influence forever. As tensions quietly escalated, an unexpected private meeting would become the turning point that changed everything. Few people know exactly what happened inside the private meeting that reportedly altered the course of the state visit. No official transcript exists. No public explanation was ever offered. Yet according to whispers circulating through royal corridors, the conversation ended with a dramatic decision. One that would remove Camilla from the center of a major royal engagement and place Catherine directly in the spotlight. By the time senior advisors were reportedly called into that urgent discussion, the palace was already carrying the weight of weeks of quiet tension. The cancelled plans had not yet reached the public in full, but inside the royal machine, the pressure was building fast. This was no ordinary calendar review. This was a moment where reputation, control, and the future image of the crown were all placed on the same table. And the question hanging over everyone was brutally simple. Who could carry the monarchy forward without causing another storm? For some in the room, Camilla represented continuity. She had stood beside the king through public doubt, private struggle, and years of criticism. Removing her from a major state visit role would not only be seen as a practical adjustment, it could be read as a public demotion. That danger was clear. But others reportedly argued that the monarchy had entered a different season, one where every major appearance had to speak to the future, not just protect the past. And that was when William's position became impossible to ignore. According to palace whispers, William did not present his alternative as a soft suggestion. He presented it as a solution. Catherine, he allegedly believed, had the steadiness, public trust, and emotional discipline needed for the moment. She could step into the duties without turning them into a personal battle. She could carry the weight without appearing hungry for power. Most importantly, she could give the crown a cleaner, calmer face at a time when every internal crack risked becoming a headline. The room reportedly shifted when Catherine's name was placed at the center of the plan. Some officials were caught off guard. Others understood instantly what it meant. This was not just about who attended briefings or greeted guests. It was about who the palace believed should define the next chapter. Debate sharpened. Concerns were raised. What would Camilla think? How would her supporters react? Would the public see this as modernization or as a cold act of royal sidelining? Each question added more heat, but none of them stopped the decision from moving forward. And then came the turning point. The plan was approved for immediate action. No grand statement. No emotional explanation. Just a quiet order that changed everything. Catherine's team would be brought in. Camilla's schedule would be adjusted. William's office would oversee the transition with controlled silence. In that moment, secrecy became the palace's shield, but also its weakness, because the more they hid, the more people wondered what had truly happened. Once the decision was made, the challenge became executing it, and that process would create even more shockwaves throughout the royal household. What happened next surprised even those who supported William's decision. Instead of gradually assuming responsibilities, Catherine reportedly moved into the role with remarkable speed. Briefings, preparations, diplomatic planning, and public engagements suddenly revolved around her. To supporters, it looked like a natural evolution. To critics, it looked like something far more deliberate and far more significant. The moment the order moved from private decision to active planning, the entire rhythm of the palace changed. Catherine was no longer being quietly prepared in the background. She was now the center of the operation. Every detail that had once been built around Camilla's expected role began shifting toward Catherine's office with stunning speed. Briefing notes were redirected. Advisor lists were revised. Diplomatic schedules were quietly adjusted. The palace did not announce a revolution, but inside its walls, people could feel one happening. For Catherine, the pressure was enormous. This was not a ceremonial favor or a small public duty. This was a state-level responsibility, the kind of role that tests not only confidence, but control. One mistake could become a headline. One uncertain answer could be turned into proof that William had moved too fast. Yet those close to the planning reportedly noticed something striking. Catherine did not appear shaken by the weight placed on her. She stepped forward with a calm that made the reassignment feel less like a gamble and more like a reveal. International partners soon began coordinating through her office, and that detail alone carried power. It meant the change was not symbolic anymore. It was operational. Catherine was not simply standing in for someone else. She was carrying the full structure of the visit. Behind every message and every preparation, the same quiet truth became harder to deny. William's decision had teeth. He had not only cancelled Camilla's plan, he had replaced it with Catherine's command. As word spread through royal circles, public attention began turning sharply toward Catherine's leadership. Supporters saw grace under pressure. Younger royal watchers saw a future queen already being trusted with the duties of tomorrow. Her image grew stronger because the moment was difficult. The more intense the situation became, the more her steadiness stood out, and that contrast was impossible to miss. Catherine appeared composed, focused, and ready, while Camilla's sudden absence created a shadow over every conversation. But with praise came comparison, and comparison is dangerous inside any palace. Every compliment for Catherine seemed to carry an unspoken question about Camilla. Why was Catherine chosen? Why was Camilla removed? Was this temporary, or was it the first sign that influence had permanently shifted? Senior aides were reportedly impressed by Catherine's confidence, but others understood that admiration could become a weapon. The more Catherine succeeded, the more painful Camilla's sidelining looked. By the time preparations advanced fully under Catherine's direction, observers were no longer asking whether she could handle the role. They were asking whether this was the beginning of a new royal order. William had opened the door, Catherine had walked through it, and the palace now had to face the consequences of what that entrance revealed. But while Catherine's profile was rising, attention was quietly turning toward the person who had been pushed aside. For someone accustomed to representing the crown on major occasions, watching those responsibilities disappear overnight would be difficult under any circumstances. Yet palace insiders suggest the emotional impact reached far beyond a simple scheduling adjustment. Behind the headlines, questions about status, influence, and future relevance suddenly became impossible to ignore. For Camilla, the hardest blow was not only the loss of a state visit role, it was the meaning attached to it. Duties inside the royal family are rarely just duties. They are signals. They tell the public who is trusted, who is rising, and who still holds power when the doors close. So when the full scope of the reassignment reportedly became clear, it was not seen as a harmless reshuffle. It felt like a message written in silence, and everyone close to the situation understood how deeply it could cut. Her supporters were said to be alarmed. Some had spent years defending her place within the monarchy, arguing that she had earned stability after surviving the coldest years of public judgment. To them, watching Catherine take complete control of the visit was not just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Because the more Catherine appeared ready, the more Camilla appeared removed from the center of influence. And in a family built on symbols, absence can be as powerful as presence. Questions quickly began circling around her future public role. Was this only one painful moment, or was it the start of a quieter reduction? Would Camilla still be trusted with major duties, or would the most important responsibilities now move toward William and Catherine? Long-standing allies reportedly discussed the implications in private, trying to understand whether this was a temporary correction or the beginning of a permanent shift. But the palace offered no clear answer, and that silence made every theory feel possible. Outside the inner circle, speculation intensified. The story was no longer only about Catherine stepping forward. It became about Camilla being pushed back. Every report, every whisper, every carefully worded comment added another layer of tension. Some saw William's choice as bold and necessary. Others saw it as cold, even ruthless. But the emotional reality was sharper than the public debate. A senior royal who had fought for acceptance was now facing the fear of becoming less essential. That fear reportedly rippled through royal circles. It touched old loyalties, old wounds, and old rivalries that had never fully disappeared. For years, Camilla had learned how to survive pressure. But this was pressure from within, and that made it more painful. It was not a public protest. It was not a hostile headline. It was a decision made by the future king, and it placed Catherine exactly where Camilla had expected to stand. As the public narrative shifted, the monarchy seemed to be telling a new story without saying it directly. The focus was turning toward the next generation, toward William's judgment and Catherine's strength. And for Camilla, that raised the most difficult question of all. If the future was now being built around someone else, where did that leave her? As debate intensified around Camilla's position, an even bigger question began dominating conversations across the palace. What if the cancelled state visit was never the real story? What if it was merely the first visible move in a much larger plan? As royal observers pieced together recent events, a striking pattern began to emerge. Decisions that once appeared isolated suddenly looked connected, revealing what many believed was William's vision for the monarchy's future. Behind the drama, William's reported choice began to look less like emotion and more like strategy. This was not simply a prince reacting to one disagreement or protecting Catherine from being overlooked. It appeared to be part of a sharper royal vision, one built around a smaller, cleaner, more disciplined monarchy. William, according to insiders, was no longer interested in letting old habits decide the future. He wanted structure, he wanted clarity. And above all, he wanted the public to see who would carry the crown next. That meant certain responsibilities could no longer stay where tradition had placed them. Duties had to move toward the figures who represented tomorrow, not yesterday. Catherine's growing role was therefore not accidental. It was central. Every briefing she attended, every diplomatic task placed under her control, every moment where her calm authority replaced palace uncertainty added another piece to the pattern. She was not being used as a temporary substitute. She was being positioned as a leading pillar of the next royal era. This shift created a new kind of pressure inside the household. Older hierarchies, once treated as untouchable, suddenly looked vulnerable. The idea that rank alone should decide visibility began to clash with a modern demand for trust, discipline, and public connection. William's team reportedly understood that younger audiences did not respond to titles the same way past generations had. They responded to strength. They responded to composure. They responded to figures who seemed steady during chaos. And in that calculation, Catherine became one of the monarchy's strongest assets. Public engagement strategies began changing as well. The palace needed fewer mixed messages and more controlled moments. It needed fewer internal distractions and more emotional connection. Advisors reportedly discussed how future transitions could be made smoother if the next generation was already carrying heavier responsibilities before the official handover came. In that sense, the cancelled state visit became more than a disruption. It became a test run. Could Catherine take full command? Could William impose his judgment? Could the monarchy move forward without asking permission from every corner of the old guard? The answer, for many observers, was becoming clear. William was showing that he would not simply inherit the crown's problems. He would reshape them before they reached him. That made his strategy powerful, but also dangerous. Because every move toward modernization carries a cost, every new center of influence leaves someone else feeling abandoned. And if Catherine's rise was the clearest sign of the future, then Camilla's reduced role was the clearest warning that the past was losing ground. Yet every major transformation creates resistance, and resistance was already beginning to surface in unexpected places. As whispers became headlines and speculation became controversy, the atmosphere inside royal circles reportedly grew more volatile than anyone expected. Supporters of William viewed the changes as necessary. Others saw them as a direct challenge to established traditions. Suddenly, what began as one cancelled state visit had evolved into a wider struggle over the monarchy's future direction. Inside the palace, the quiet disagreement was no longer quiet. It had become a test of loyalty. On one side were those who believed William had done what the monarchy desperately needed: cut through hesitation, protect the future, and place Catherine where the public already wanted to see her. To them, the cancelled state visit was not disrespect. It was discipline. It was proof that William was willing to make hard decisions before the crown became trapped by old mistakes. But on the other side, the mood was darker. Camilla's loyalists reportedly saw the move as a dangerous break from royal order. They feared that if a senior figure could be pushed aside so suddenly, then no position was truly safe. Behind private conversations, one question grew heavier. Was William modernizing the monarchy, or was he rewriting its rules before anyone had agreed to them? That question split opinion and turned simple planning into a battle over power. The divide became sharper as both sides began protecting their own version of events. William's supporters whispered that the decision was about strength, timing, and public trust. Camilla's defenders argued it was unnecessary, humiliating, and too public to ignore. Catherine, caught in the center of it all, became both symbol and target. Every sign of confidence from her drew admiration from one side and resentment from the other. Her rise was no longer just a success story. It had become evidence in a palace argument. Senior insiders reportedly worried that the damage could last beyond one state visit. They knew royal families survive through unity, or at least the appearance of it. Once the public senses division, every gesture becomes suspicious. Every absence becomes a clue. Every smile is examined for hidden pain. And now, with Catherine elevated and Camilla sidelined, the monarchy faced the dangerous possibility that its internal struggle had become impossible to hide. Public reaction only added pressure. Some praised William for showing courage and putting the future first. Others questioned whether Camilla had been treated with fairness. The debate spread quickly because it touched something deeper than protocol. It touched the emotional story of the crown itself. Who belongs at the heart of it? Who is fading from it? And who has the authority to decide? For William, the pressure to justify his decision grew heavier with each passing day. Yet he remained controlled, almost unreadable, as if he understood that speaking too soon could weaken the very power move he had made. But silence has a price. It lets others fill the space with fear, anger, and accusation. And as tensions tightened across the royal household, everyone sensed that one more revelation could either settle the matter or tear it open completely. And just when it seemed the situation couldn't become more dramatic, a final revelation threatened to redefine everything. Sometimes a single decision changes more than a schedule. It changes perceptions, expectations, and the balance of power itself. As Catherine completed the duties once assigned elsewhere, many began asking whether they were witnessing more than a temporary reassignment. Were they actually watching the emergence of the monarchy's next central figure? And if so, what did that mean for everyone else standing in her shadow? By the time Catherine carried the reassigned responsibilities through to completion, the story had already moved beyond palace whispers. What began as shock had turned into proof for her supporters. She had entered a moment filled with pressure, suspicion, and comparison, yet she did not collapse beneath it. Instead, she gave William's decision the one thing it needed most: results. Every completed duty strengthened the belief that this was not a mistake. It was a turning point. Public praise began rising with unusual force. To many, Catherine looked calm under weight, graceful under judgment, and prepared for a future that once seemed far away. Her success changed the entire meaning of the cancelled plans. It was no longer only about Camilla losing ground. It became about Catherine gaining command. And that difference mattered. Because when the public begins to see someone as essential, the palace can no longer treat that person as secondary. William's choice, once questioned as sudden, now appeared increasingly strategic. He had taken a risk by redirecting such important duties, but Catherine's performance made the risk look calculated. It suggested that he had seen something others had missed. He understood that the monarchy could not survive on history alone. It needed figures who could carry emotion, discipline, and public confidence all at once. Catherine had done that, and in doing so, she had become more than the woman assigned to a state visit. She had become the symbol of what came next. Still, Camilla's future role remained uncertain, and that uncertainty kept the tension alive. Was she simply pushed aside for one moment, or had the palace revealed a new order by accident? Observers debated every detail, searching for clues in silence, timing, and responsibility. Some believed the monarchy was wisely preparing its next chapter. Others believed it had created a wound that would not heal quietly. But the deeper question was no longer only about Camilla. It was about power itself. Who shapes the royal future before the crown officially changes hands? Who decides when tradition must step back? And how many more duties will shift before the public realizes a transformation is already underway? Catherine's rise answered one question, but opened many more. In the end, this alleged cancellation became more than a royal controversy. It became a warning that the balance inside the monarchy may be changing faster than anyone expected. Catherine emerged stronger, William looked more decisive, and Camilla was left facing a future filled with unanswered questions. The palace may try to call it duty, timing, or strategy, but to those watching closely, it looked like the beginning of something far bigger. Because if one cancelled state visit could reshape the balance of power inside the monarchy, the next royal decision may be even more extraordinary. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.